The cold wind blew through the open market, carrying the smell of dust, metal, and pain. A young alien girl stood on a raised platform, completely stripped, her small body shivering in front of a noisy crowd. Her skin was covered in bruises and dirt, her eyes wide with fear. But she didn't cry. Not anymore. She had no tears left, only shame. The auctioneer shouted loudly, "Lot 43. Last item of the night." He pointed to the girl, laughing. No clothes, no past. No future, just a warm body. The crowd laughed. Some whistled, some looked away, pretending not to care. But no one stepped forward to bid. The girl stared at the ground, trying to disappear. Her arms were wrapped tightly around her chest, but it didn't help. She felt like everyone was peeling her soul with their eyes. She had once been a noble servant, but when the family lost their status, they sold her off like trash. The traders tore off her clothes to humiliate her further, saying, "Let them see how worthless you are." She remembered her last meal. It was 3 days ago, a piece of dry bread. She remembered her last hug. It was from her younger sister. Before they were separated, her stomach growled, but no one noticed. 10 credits? The auctioneer asked. No? 5. Still, no one raised a hand, not even for free. He laughed again. Fine, we'll dump her in the back alley like the others. As he moved to wave the guards, someone in the crowd finally moved. A tall man in a dark coat stepped forward. His face was partly covered with a scarf. Only his eyes were visible human eyes. He didn't speak loudly, didn't shout or joke like the others. He simply said, "I'll take her." The auctioneer blinked. "You sure, human?" "She's nothing, not even worth." The man raised one hand, and without a word, tossed a small card payment. The guards hesitated, but the auctioneer shrugged. "She's yours," he said, laughing. "Hope you enjoy damaged goods." The girl didn't move, too shocked to understand what just happened. She had been ready to be dragged out and dumped behind the market like the others, but instead, the human took off his long coat and gently placed it over her shoulders. It was warm, thick, and smelled like firewood and earth. Her eyes went wide. Not because of the coat, but because no one had ever covered her before. Only stripped, punished, and laughed at. The human said nothing as he guided her down from the platform. The crowd murmured, confused and curious. Some even booed. Why? Waste credits on trash. One alien shouted. The human didn't respond. He just kept walking with the girl. Slowly, gently, as if she mattered, as if she wasn't broken. The girl couldn't speak. Her voice was gone. Not just from fear, but from years of silence. Still, she tried to look at his face. Why did he help her? What did he want from her? As they moved away from the market lights, her legs trembled. She almost fell, but he caught her without a word. Picked her up like she weighed nothing. She expected him to throw her, or touch her, or speak harshly. But he did none of that. Instead, he walked with calm steps. Carrying her close to his chest, her head rested against his coat. And for the first time in many years, she felt safe. Not fully, not completely, but just a little spark of it, enough to make her chest ache. The stars above were clear, the market sounds faded, and her eyes slowly closed. She whispered something in her native tongue, so quiet he didn't understand, but it meant, why? He didn't reply, maybe didn't hear, but his arms didn't loosen. And so the girl who had been stripped, shamed, and called worthless, was now wrapped in a warm coat and held by the one being in the galaxy she didn't expect a human. And that night, as they disappeared into the dark, no one knew this simple act of kindness had just changed lives forever. The transport door slid open with a low hum. Cold air brushed against her skin as the human placed her gently inside. The coat was still around her, warm and heavy, but her body trembled not from cold, but from fear. She sat quietly on the edge of the seat, afraid to lean back, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly. The human didn't say anything. He sat across from her, his eyes on the road, his hands calmly on the controls. The silence between them felt thick. She clutched the coat tightly, afraid he would take it back any moment. That's how it usually worked. Kindness first, pain. After, she waited for the questions, the orders, the voice demanding she earn her stay. But nothing came. Instead, the transport glided smoothly through the night. Trees passed by the window. Stars above blinked silently. The hum of the engine was the only sound. Her stomach growled, low and embarrassing. She flinched, expecting him to shout, but he only turned slightly and opened a metal box beside him. He pulled out a protein bar and handed it to her without a word. She looked at it like it was a trap. Her hands shook as she reached out slowly, took it, unwrapped it, and bit into it. It was dry and a little salty, but it was food. She hadn't tasted anything like it in weeks. As she ate, her eyes stayed on him, still trying to figure him out. Was he broken? Was he pretending to be kind? What did he want? The human looked at her just once, not with hunger, not with power, but something strange, something like pity. He pressed a button and a soft blanket unfolded from the back of the seat. He tossed it toward her gently. She caught it, confused. She already had his coat. Why give her more? "I'm not going to hurt you," he finally said, his voice calm. Quiet, almost tired, the girl blinked, staring at him. She didn't reply. Her voice still felt locked in chains. "I know you've been through a lot," he added, "but you're safe now." That word again, safe, she had heard it once before. From a traitor who later beat her when she didn't smile fast enough. She pulled the blanket closer, but still sat like a statue. Her legs were pulled up, arms wrapped around her. Knees, she was trying to disappear into herself. Then she did something that surprised even her. She whispered, "Why?" He didn't answer right away, just kept driving. Then he replied, "Because no one else did." Those 5 words hit her like a stone. They hurt more than kindness should. Her hands started shaking again. She dropped the protein bar, but he didn't scold her. He just picked it up and set it gently back in her lap. The rest of the ride stayed quiet, but something had changed. The air wasn't just silent. It was soft, heavy with unspoken things. She leaned against the seat now. Not fully relaxed, but no longer frozen. Her eyes felt heavy. She hadn't slept in days. As she drifted off, she held the coat closer, breathing in its scent. It smelled like wood smoke and something human, warm, strange, but real. She didn't know his name yet, and he didn't know hers, but something had begun between them, a thin thread of trust. Pulled tight by silence, fear, and one quiet act of kindness. Outside, snow began to fall. Inside the transport, the girl finally slept, not like a slave, not like a prisoner, but like someone who dared to believe she might live to see morning. The door creaked open, warm air flowing out into the cold night. The human stepped inside first, then turned and gently carried the sleeping girl in his arms. She didn't wake, only shifted slightly as he crossed a small wooden cabin. He laid her on the old couch near the fire, still wrapped in his coat. She looked tiny there, like a wounded bird, arms curled close to her chest. He didn't speak, just moved around, quietly stoking the fire, adjusting the heater. And pulling a thick blanket from the shelf, he placed it over her, careful not to startle her. Then he went to the small kitchen and began heating something, a simple broth made of clean water. A few root vegetables and some dried meat. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, filling, and honest. The smell of food made her stir. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking in the dim firelight. She sat up quickly, alarmed, until she remembered the coat, the blanket, the quiet. He turned and saw her awake. "You're safe," he said again, calmly. Like a promise, she nodded slowly, still unsure. Still afraid it might all vanish, she pulled the blanket tighter around her and whispered, "Where am I?" "My home," he replied, placing a bowl of soup on the small table. "You can rest here." For as long as you need, the girl looked around. The cabin was simple wooden walls, a fireplace, one bed, one chair, and shelves filled with tools. And books. It smelled like smoke, old paper, and something she couldn't name peace. She moved to the bowl, sat on the floor beside it, and picked up the spoon with both hands. She had never used one before, not like this. It slipped. Splashed a little broth on her arm. She froze, expecting punishment. But the human only smiled and said, "Try again. It's okay." She blinked, confused, and tried again. This time, the spoon stayed steady. The first sip burned her tongue, but it was wonderful. Rich and soft. Tears came to her eyes, not because of the heat, but because no one had ever cooked for her. Not once in her life, she ate slowly, carefully, until the bowl was empty. When she looked up, the human was still sitting by the fire, watching her not like a master or a buyer, but like someone trying to understand. She whispered, "Thank you." Her voice cracked, but he heard it and nodded. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then said sadly, softly, as if the name might break. "I'm Mason," he said back, pointing to himself. She repeated it. Mason. Testing it like a new word, a safe word. He reached over and handed her a soft cloth. "You can clean up in there." He pointed toward the small bathroom at the back of the cabin. "Take your time." Sally clutched the cloth and walked slowly, carefully, every step feeling unreal. She opened the bathroom door and stared. Clean water, soap, and even a towel. It was like magic. She stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself. Really looked. Her hair was tangled, her face bruised, her body thin and scarred. But she was warm, clothed, and no one was shouting. She washed, slowly, like it was a holy act. The dirt fell away, but the shame stayed. Still, it felt like the first step to something she couldn't name yet. When she came out, she wore the clean shirt Mason had left by the door. It hung off her small frame, but it was soft and whole. Mason had placed a cup of water by the fire. She sat down quietly, watching the flames dance. He didn't ask questions, didn't talk too much. He just sat nearby, letting her exist. Sally spoke first, voice barely above a breath. "Why are you kind to me?" He thought for a long moment before answering. "Because someone should have been." Long before me. The fire cracked, and Sally stared at him for a while. Her fingers gripped the edge of the coat again, the same coat he'd placed around her. When she had nothing, she didn't understand him yet. But she no longer feared him. That night, as snow began to fall gently outside, Sally curled up near the fireplace, eyes half closed, breathing steady. For the first time in her life, she fell asleep without fear. Not because someone told her to sleep, but because she finally felt human. Morning light peeked through the cabin window, warm and golden. Sally sat beside the fire, wrapped in a blanket. Her fingers held a cup of tea, though it had already gone cold. She didn't drink it, just held it like it gave her strength. Mason was outside chopping wood, the steady rhythm of the axe echoing through the trees. Sally's eyes followed the sound, unsure why she felt calmer every time it hit the stump. He hadn't locked her in, hadn't put chains on her feet. She was free to run, but her legs didn't move. He returned with an armful of logs, boots covered in snow. He glanced at her and gave a nod, then walked to the fire and stacked the wood. "You okay?" he asked simply. She nodded, then looked down. Her voice came out small. "Do you want my name or number?" Mason paused. "I already know your name," he said. "And I don't care about numbers." She didn't understand, so he sat down across from her and added, "You're not a thing, Sally, not a product." Not an item, just a person. The words shook her more than chains ever had. Her whole life, she'd been told she was property. Owned, used, sold, but now someone said she was a person. Like it mattered, she whispered. I don't know how to be one. He didn't laugh or correct her. You don't have to try, he said. Just be that night. She helped him cook, chopped vegetables with shaky hands, dropped a few, burned. One finger butt smiled a little when Mason praised her for trying. Later, she found a small book on the shelf, full of drawings, creatures of earth, foxes, deer, birds, flowers. She stared at the pictures for hours. Eyes wide, Mason noticed. You like nature? She nodded quickly. I never saw trees before, she said, only stone walls. The sadness in her voice cut deep. He gave her the book. It's yours now. She hugged it tightly like a treasure. One evening, as snow fell outside again, Sally sat near the window, tracing her finger along the frosted glass. She suddenly asked, Do I have to sleep with you? The question struck Mason hard, not because of the words, but because of how empty her voice sounded. He stood slowly and walked over, knelt beside her. No, he said gently, never. She blinked, unsure. Then why did you take me? He looked her in the eyes and answered, Because someone needed to say no to what they did to you. Sally didn't speak after that, but her hand slowly reached out and touched his sleeve. A silent thank you. That night, she dreamed of sunlight. Not cages, of fields, not markets. But the next morning, everything changed. Mason went into the village for supplies, told her to stay inside and rest. He'd only be an hour. But Sally heard a voice outside. One she remembered from the auction, the merchant who had laughed the loudest. He stood at the edge of the woods, talking to someone on a comm device. Yeah, she's here, he said. The runaway from House Valrin, a human, has her isle. Send coordinates. Sally froze, blood draining from her face. She knew that name Valrin. The noble house that once owned her. If they found her, they'd take her back, or worse. She backed away from the window, her heart pounding. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs refused. Mason returned minutes later, carrying a bag of food, but as soon as he stepped inside, he saw her white face, shaking eyes locked on the window. They found me, she whispered. They're coming. Mason didn't panic. He closed the door quietly, set the bag down, and took a long breath. Then he said, Let them come. Sally's eyes widened. They'll take me. Not while I'm breathing, he said firmly. Not while you're under my roof. He loaded his old rifle, checked the cabin's perimeter, locked the doors. His calmness scared her more than shouting would have. She had never been protected, never seen someone prepare to fight for her. And for the first time, deep in her chest, she felt something strange and new. Not fear, not shame, but something close to being worth saving. Sally didn't sleep that night. She sat curled in the corner of the room, blanket pulled over her knees. Her eyes stayed on the door. Even though it was locked, her fingers gripped the coat Mason had given her like it was a shield. She had once dreamed of freedom, but now that she had it, she was terrified it would be taken away. Mason didn't say much after she told him what she heard. He just stayed near, keeping the lights low, checking the sensors outside. He made her warm tea, left it beside her, and whispered, You're safe with me, but the words no longer felt enough. The world outside didn't care about safety. She had seen what the nobles did to runaway shackles, beatings, sometimes even worse. They didn't like their toys escaping, especially ones who knew secrets. Sally had seen too much during her time with House Valrin. She had witnessed how they treated workers, how they lied to the council. She knew things, and that made her a risk. That night, she finally broke her silence and told Mason the truth. They're not just angry I ran, she said, her voice trembling. They're afraid I'll talk. Mason's eyes narrowed. "What did you see?" She hesitated, then whispered, "They used poison on workers, lied about the numbers, sold children to black markets." Mason's hands curled into fists. Not at her, but at the monsters who had done this. "You don't have to carry this alone." "Anymore?" he told her, but she looked at him with wet eyes and said, "If they find me, they'll kill you too." He didn't flinch. Let them try. The next morning, a sleek silver drone flew over the cabin, its eyes scanning, its wings humming. Mason shot it out of the sky with one clean blast. Sally jumped at the sound, then ran to the window, watching the smoking wreck fall into the trees. "They know where I am now," she whispered. Mason calmly packed a bag, grabbed supplies, food, a portable cum jammer, and his coat. "We're leaving," he said. "We'll find a safer place, somewhere." Remote, Sally hesitated. I can go alone. You don't have to." He turned sharply and said, "You're not going anywhere without me. I didn't save you just to watch you run again." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. They left the cabin quietly, disappearing into the woods. Each step deeper into the trees made her heart race and calm at the same time. Snow crunched beneath their feet. Wind whispered through the branches. Sally stayed close to him, one hand gripping his coat. As night fell again, they set up camp near an old mining tunnel. Mason made a small fire inside, careful not to let the smoke rise too far. Sally sat beside it, knees to her chest. "Do you ever get tired of helping people like me?" she asked, not looking up. Mason stirred the fire gently. "No," he said. "I get tired of watching good people suffer." She didn't reply, just leaned her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. The silence between them now wasn't heavy or afraid. It was quiet, warm, a shared silence. Suddenly, she spoke again, her voice soft like snow. "If I die, will you remember me?" Mason turned his head, looked at her. "No one's dying, Sally," he said. "Not while I'm here." She smiled for the first time in days, a small one, but real, deep in the woods. Surrounded by cold and danger, she found something no one ever gave her, not just safety, but someone who believed she was worth saving, even when the whole galaxy had turned its back. Snow fell heavy and quiet as they moved deeper into the woods. Mason kept his steps firm, alert. His eyes scanned every movement, every branch, every shadow. Sally walked beside him, close, silent, her hands wrapped in the coat he had once placed. Around her broken body, they found shelter in the ruins of an old outpost, stone walls, half covered by snow, and a roof barely standing. But it was enough. Inside, Mason started another fire. Sally lit a small lantern and placed it between them. Neither of them said much, but their eyes did. Hers asked, "How long can we run?" His answered, "As long as we must." Then, just before midnight, the silence broke, a sharp click, the low buzz of an energy scanner, and then a mechanical voice in the distance. "Target located. Prepare for retrieval." Mason stood instantly. Rifle in hand, Sally backed into the wall, heart pounding. "They found us," she whispered, her voice shaking outside. Red lights flickered through the trees. Armored soldiers marched forward, Dalians wearing dark crests of House Velrin. 4 of them, plus a tall one with silver armor, a tracker, built to smell fear. Mason stepped in front of Sally and said calmly, "Stay behind me, no matter what." She wanted to scream, run, hide, anything, but her legs wouldn't move. The first soldier shouted, "Hand her over, human." "She is marked property of Velrin," Mason replied. "She's not property, not anymore." The soldier raised his weapon. "You have 5 seconds to comply." Mason didn't wait. He moved first. The blast from his rifle lit the trees. One soldier dropped, another flew backward into the snow. Sally gasped, her hands over her mouth. She had never seen anyone fight for her. Only against her, but Mason, he was calm, precise, unstoppable. The tracker rushed in, claws out, but Mason rolled, shot, and hit its leg. The creature howled, too. Soldiers remained. They opened fire. The blasts scorched the snow. Mason was fast but not invincible. One beam grazed his arm. He winced, but stood tall. I said she's not going back. Sally watched, frozen. Her mind screamed to run, but her heart knew she couldn't leave him. Not now, not ever. She saw something near her foot, Mason's second weapon, a compact stun gun. Her fingers reached for it slowly. The last soldier raised a blaster at Mason's back. Before he could fire, Sally stepped out, aimed the stun gun, and pulled the trigger. A blue bolt hit the soldier in the chest. Dropping him in the snow, Mason turned in surprise, saw her standing there, shaking, eyes wide, hands trembling. But she had done it. She had protected him. The tracker limped away into the forest. Leaving its fallen behind, silence returned. The only sound was their breathing and the fire crackling weakly behind them. Mason walked over to her slowly, bleeding, his steps unsure, but his eyes full of pride. Sally dropped the weapon and fell into his arms. Her body shook, not from fear, but from the rush of courage she never knew she had. "You saved me," he said quietly. She whispered back, "You saved me first." They sat together by the fire again, Mason tending to his wound, Sally refusing to let go of his hand. "I'm not going back," she said, louder now, stronger. "No," Mason said. "You're moving forward. With me." Outside, the forest hid their scent. The stars above watched silently, and the girl who had once been stripped and shamed now stood tall beside the human who had chosen to fight for her. Not because she was property, but because she was finally free. The forest was silent again. Smoke from the small fire curled into the cold morning sky. The snow had stopped, and light touched the frozen trees. Mason and Sally sat quietly by the glowing embers. Her head rested on his shoulder, his arm gently around her. Neither of them said a word, but both knew what had just happened. They had survived the night tand. Something more had changed. For the first time in her life, Sally wasn't running. He made a simple breakfast bread, warmed over fire. Water boiled with dried herbs. Sally ate slowly, savoring every bite, not because it was delicious, but because it was shared. Later, Mason looked over the broken remains of his rifle and said, "We can't stay here." Sally nodded. "They'll send more, but we have proof now," he said, pointing to the tracker's body, still half buried in snow. "You said you knew what they were hiding. If we reach the inner colony, we can speak to the Alliance." Sally bit her lip. "They won't believe someone like me. They'll believe someone like us," Mason replied. "You're not alone anymore." She looked at him, her eyes filled with something new, not fear, not sadness, but belief. They packed their things quietly. Mason gave her a scarf and gloves from his own bag. "Too big," she said, laughing softly. He smiled. "You'll grow into them." They hiked through the snow-covered forest, hand in hand. When they reached the edge of the trees, a large outpost blinked in the distant towers. Transports, scanners. Sally stopped walking, her grip on his hand tightened. "I'm scared," she whispered. He leaned in close. "That's okay. I'll speak first." Together, they walked into the checkpoint. The guards raised their weapons until they saw Mason's ID. He stepped forward and calmly said, "This girl is a victim of House Velrin. I'm requesting protection and full testimony hearing." The guards looked unsure at first. Then Sally stepped beside him, raised her chin, and said, "My name is Sally Velrin. I was their servant. I saw what they did. I can prove it." The silence that followed felt like it lasted hours. Then one of the guards nodded slowly. "Come with us," he said. "We'll take you to the council." Inside the station, warm lights glowed. Real walls surrounded them. And no one looked at her like she was trash. A nurse brought clean clothes, soft slippers, and food, as Sally. Changed, she looked at herself in the mirror, really looked. Her bruises were fading, her hair cleaner, her eyes brighter. She stepped out into the hallway where Mason was waiting. His arm was still bandaged, but his smile was strong. "I look different," she said, twirling once. "You look free," he answered. That night they sat side by side in the quiet guest room. Sally looked at the stars outside the window, then at Mason. "Do I still belong to you?" she asked gently. He turned toward her, his eyes calm. "You never belonged to me," he said. "You chose to stay. That means more." She leaned her head against his shoulder again, breathing slow. In that moment, the shame was gone. The chains were broken, and the girl once stripped and shamed now wore her own name like a crown, wrapped not just in a coat but in respect, protection, and something even stronger. A future with him beside her, always.